A frigid cold spell blankets South Korea's capital and its nearby regions.
Officials warn citizens of heavy snowfall as thick as 6 to 8 centimeters. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie at Go Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. Philippines' economic growth expanded to 7.6% in 2022. New survey reports 34% of Filipinos say their quality of life improved last year. U.S. President Joe Biden declares 15 nations will enhance Ukraine forces. Kremlin official asserts Europe planned a war against Russia. And North Korea locks down Pyongyang over respiratory illness outbreak. Despite a skyrocketing inflation of 8.1% at the end of 2022, the Philippine economy expanded to 7.2% in the last quarter of the year. This pushes the country's overall economic growth to 7.6% for the whole year. Randy Bernardino reports.
The Philippine economy grew by 7.2% in the last quarter of 2022. The Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, reports that the fourth quarter growth pushes the country's economy to 7.6% year-on-year growth, exceeding the government's target ceiling of 6.5 to 7.5% for the entire year of 2022. PSA national statistician Dennis Mapa says retail trade, repair of motor vehicles, and motorcycles were the main contributors in the fourth quarter economic growth with 8.7%, financial and insurance activities with 9.8%, and manufacturing with 4.2%. The industry sector posted 4.8% growth, while the service sector had 9.8%. However, the PSA says the agriculture, forestry, and fishing sectors posted a decline of negative 0.3%.
Sana italang pagtaas ng GDP na 7.2% sa ikapat na quarter ng taong 2022, ang services sector ay nagtala ng pinakamataas na contribution na 5.8 percentage points. Ito naman ay sinundan ng industry sector na nagtala na contribution na 1.5 percentage points, habang ang agriculture, forestry, and fishing ay nakapag-ambag ng negative 0.03 percentage points sa kabuuang pagtaas ng GDP.
National Economic and Development Authority, or NEDA, says the country's growth is among the fastest in the world. NEDA Director General Secretary Arsenio Balisacan says the strong economic growth in the fourth quarter reflects the full reopening of the economy and strong domestic demand.
Yung pagtaas ng presyo in recent months ng mga agricultural products ay largely due to insufficient supply relative to demand. Saka yung sa global marketplace din mataas din ang presyo. Now sa ekonomiya naman natin ganang sinabi ko, we were adversely affected by typhoons, by animal diseases, and also to some extent our inability to bring in the imports at the time that when they were most needed.
The economic team projects the country's GDP growth for this year 2023 to fall between 6 to 7%. Balisacan says they strictly monitor the country's economic outlook for this year, following threats of a world economic recession, especially in terms of food security. Randy Bernardino for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, Connected, on point.
Many Filipinos say the quality of their lives improved in the past year, and that's according to a social weather station survey. The survey had 1,200 residents from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Nadine Agila tells us more.
Around 34% of adult Filipinos believe their lives improved in 2022 compared to the previous year. This is the result of the survey conducted by the social weather station in the whole country from December 10 to 14, 2022. 26% said the quality of their lives worsened in the past year, while 39% said their situation remained the same. However, the December 2022 net gainer score of the Philippines is at +8. This is included in the high range of +1 and +9 net gainer score. The SWS records the highest score in Mindanao from -10 to +10, which means the net gainer score is very high. Metro Manila also increased its net gainer score, which counts 18 so far, +10 in Balance Luzon and -4 in Visayas region. The fourth quarter survey was done by face-to-face interviews with 1,200 adults in Metro Manila, Balance Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Nadine Aguilar, for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Senators have debated on the committee that will handle the proposed Maharlika Investment Fund bill. Some lawmakers are pushing for a primary committee for the proposal deliberation. Mian Corvera reports.
Senators have debated which committee should handle the controversial Maharlika Investment Fund bill. Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel questioned the referral of Senate Bill number 1670 to Senate Committee on Banks. Pimentel says Senator Mark Villar is the author of the proposal and it's questionable that his committee would deliberate on the bill. Pimentel wants to transfer the bill to the Committee on Government Corporation and Public Enterprises. Based on the proposal, a new government-owned and controlled corporation or GOCC would be created to manage the Maharlika Investment Fund. He notes the importance of a primary committee to deliberate on the proposal since it will be responsible for scheduling the hearing and decide who would be invited as a resource person and how long or fast the discussion will be. Pimentel clarifies the proposal does not involve currency or has nothing to do with banking.
I think the correct and proper committee to be the primary committee would be our Committee on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises because undoubtedly the two bills create a GOCC. But it does not create a bank. It is not about currency. But is it about the third subject matter of financial institution under the committee that we referred it to? Hindi po. We looked at the definition of a financial institution. That is an institution under the supervision of the BSP. That is a quasi-bank or an institution similar to a bank. That is an institution which deals with the public so that money collected from the public is directed to those in need of funding.
However, Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri says the primary objective of the proposal is the creation of an investment fund and not fund manager.
The House of Representatives used also the Committee on Banks and Financial Institutions to take this measure up, and they passed it under that committee. Funding source, it will be used for funding mechanism, and therefore on the face of it all, it seems to more appropriate to leave it with the Committee on Banks and Financial Institutions. Government corporations are more or less, if we're going to set up a new GOCC, government-owned and controlled corporation, and create a charter. We're not creating a charter, I believe, in this Maharlika Wealth Fund.
Senator Francis Tolentino says no government corporation was assigned to manage the Maharlika Investment Fund, so the Committee on GOCCs does not cover it yet.
The mere mention of GFIs, which is still a work in progress, would not be sufficient to lodge specifically on the said committee the Maharlika Investments Funds. So, Mr. President, the first referral to the Committee on Banks would be in order.
Senate Majority Leader Joel Villanueva states that according to the rules, Villar's Committee on Banks has jurisdiction on all issues concerning banks, financial institutions, currencies, mutual funds, and circulation of money.
Senate Bill number 1670. It proposes, Mr. President, to establish an independent investment fund by investing national funds, and the fund shall be sourced from investable funds of select GFIs, from contributions of national government, and from declared dividends of the BSP, among others. Mr. President, if you go further, in Section 11 of the said bill, it states that the initial capitalization shall be sourced from Land Bank and DBP.
The Senate voted on the matter. Only 2 senators have favored the motion to transfer the referral of the bill, while 19 opposed and 1 abstained. Senator Pia Cayetano was the sole abstention. Mayan Corvera for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is pushing for the passage of the Magna Carta for Barangay Health Workers, or the BHW bill. The president recognizes the important contribution of BHWs in the country, especially during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and in times of calamities. Marcos says the passage of the Magna Carta for BHWs would help their ranks to elevate their lives. During Wednesday's meeting with the Presidential Legislative Liaison Officer, or PLLO, the president was elated to hear that the bill was among those approved by the House of Representatives. However, its counterpart measure is still pending in the Senate. The president expressed confidence that the Senate will pass the bill as the government's recognition of their services to the public. Under the proposed bill, BHWs will be entitled to comprehensive compensation and other benefits that include hazard allowance, transportation allowance, subsistence allowance, a one-time retirement cash incentive, health benefits, insurance coverage, vacation and maternity leave, cash gifts, and disability pay, among others.
U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is planning to visit the Philippines, according to Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Romualdez. Romualdez says Austin wants to meet with his Filipino counterpart, Defense Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. The planned visit comes after reports of a serious discussion between Manila and Washington for the conduct of joint patrols in the West Philippine Sea. Romualdez clarifies that the country holds joint patrols not only with the United States but also with other allies like Japan and Australia. Romualdez says President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s primary objective is to ensure peace and security in the region. President Marcos visited Beijing in early January to discuss issues concerning peace and security in the West Philippine Sea after reports of Chinese Coast Guard blocking Filipino fishermen in the disputed territory.
Government officials are responding seriously to the recent incident between Filipino fishermen and the Coast Guard of China. The Department of Foreign Affairs is conducting an investigation. Celine Dorado tells us more.
The Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, is still verifying and assessing reports that Chinese Coast Guards allegedly drove away Filipino fishermen in Ayungin Shoal. DFA spokesperson Maria Teresita Daza admits there are times when diplomatic actions are delayed, particularly those that happened in the West Philippine Sea. Daza says the DFA is following a process and there is a need to determine and confirm official reports of some agencies. Yet she says they will act immediately through a note verbal or diplomatic protest based on verification and assessment. Daza stresses that the Philippines and China are still in talks and have a line of communication on maritime issues.
We are committed to remaining vigilant in monitoring our waters and South China Sea issue. We're also committed to actually ensure that following verification and assessment of an incident, we will take the appropriate diplomatic action. What kind of diplomatic action will depend on the incident that actually happens. I won't use the cliche, but our business is actually in ensuring that we continue to dialogue, we continue to negotiate, we continue to make representation. And hopefully the actions that we take will then actually result to positive results.
Celine Dorado for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
As the prices of eggs continue to increase, more Filipinos prefer to shop at Kadiwa Stores in the National Capital Region. As to why, Vin Pascua tells us.
The sale of eggs in the National Capital Region has increased. Household consumers and retailers now prefer to buy cheaper eggs at Kadiwa Stores. The price of extra-large eggs in Kadiwa Stores is 250 pesos per tray compared to other markets which sells them for 285 pesos per tray. Though there was a price adjustment on eggs in December 2022, some farmer suppliers in Kadiwa Stores did not raise the price for consumers. From 500 trays of eggs per week, Kadiwa Stores are now able to sell 1,000 trays of eggs a week. Aside from eggs, Agribusiness Development Center or ADC Kadiwa Stores also sells fresh meats from the Quezon Province. Vin Pascua reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Some small poultry farms and egg producers have stopped operations due to losses. The Philippine Egg Board Association, or PEGA, says there was an overproduction of eggs in 2021 and prices plummeted. However, prices of feeds remained high, followed by the bird flu outbreak last year. PEBA says overproduction resulted in losses. Some small and medium producers had to stop their operations, while large poultry farms reduced their production. The association says these were some of the reasons for the increase in egg prices.
The remains of the Filipina killed in Kuwait are expected to arrive in the country on January 27. Foreign Affairs Undersecretary for Migrant Workers Eduardo de Vega says the body of Julibi Kabilis Ranara is expected to arrive Friday evening. De Vega says Ranara's employer will shoulder all the expenses for her repatriation.
I could tell you that they've also worked, the embassy has already worked with the employer so that the remains will be brought home, and that will be Friday night. Right? The employer being the father of the suspect had no problem funding it, but that was negotiated, that was worked out by our embassy.
Coming right up, a man who breached the U.S. Capitol is found guilty of felony and misdemeanor charges. President Joe Biden says 50 nations will enhance Ukraine's forces. And Peru faces food and fuel shortages as protests continue. Mata ng Agila International will be right back after the short break. Don't go away.
This portion is brought to you by Final Match Security and Investigation Agency.
Face your problem. That must have been the battle cry of our guest, Miss Leslie Ann Casas Poy, the founder and CEO of Kala Cosmetics Beauty and Wellness Company. After suffering from facial acne, she eventually came up with the best treatment that worked for her. We're pleased to have her here in Open for Business to talk about her business venture, Kala Cosmetics, and how it can help you be more beautiful inside and out.
May mga maganda or guwapo tingnan from the outside pero hindi pala healthy inside. We have developed products that are ingested.
Open for Business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m. This portion is brought to you by 318 Automart, Arlex Trading and Construction Supplies.
The news continues here on Mata ng Agila International. In the U.S., the man who put his feet on the desk of former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi is found guilty of felony and misdemeanor charges. Arlene Ocampo tells us more.
62-year-old Richard Barnett of Gravette, Arkansas, is found guilty here in the District of Columbia of felony and misdemeanor charges. The charges are for his actions during the January 6, 2021 breach of the U.S. Capitol. He was among rioters who disrupted a joint session of the Congress that was in the process of certifying the electoral votes related to the 2020 presidential election. Images of him at the desk of then Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, are widely circulated on mainstream and social media. One of the most infamous pictures shows him sitting reclined on Pelosi's chair with his foot up on her desk. Barnett is found guilty of all charges. He is scheduled to be sentenced on May 3. He faces a maximum penalty of 47 years in prison. Barnett and his legal team say they are going to appeal the decision. In Washington, D.C., Arlene Ocampo, reporting for Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The United States announced Wednesday that it will provide heavy tanks to help Ukraine repel Russia's invasion, mirroring a similar move by Germany in the face of dire warnings from Moscow. After months of intense lobbying for the military equipment, news of the tank supply comes as major relief for Kyiv. President Joe Biden delivered an address from the White House to announce the United States will provide 31 M1 Abrams tanks, the equivalent of one Ukrainian tank battalion, for Kyiv's fight. Unlike the German tanks, the M1 Abrams will be procured with Ukraine assistance funding rather than directly drawn from existing U.S. stocks, meaning they will not arrive on the battlefield for months. Biden says 50 nations are backing Kyiv after talks with Western allies.
That's what this is about, helping Ukraine defend and protect Ukrainian land. It is not an offensive threat to Russia. There is no offensive threat to Russia. If Russian troops return to Russia, they'll be there where they belong. This war would be over today.
After weeks of pressure from Ukraine and other allies, Germany finally green-lights the delivery of its Leopard tanks to Kyiv. While many allies have pledged military weaponry for Ukraine, Kyiv has been clamoring for Berlin's sophisticated Leopard tanks. Sources say Kyiv sees it as the key to punching and repelling Russian forces.
Wir werden der Ukraine auch Kampfpanzer zur Verfügung stellen vom Typ Leopard 2. Das ist das Ergebnis intensiver Beratung erneut mit unseren Verbündeten und internationalen Partnern.
Chancellor Olaf Scholz says that they will train Kyiv soldiers on using the tanks in Germany. He adds they will also provide logistics, ammunition, and maintenance for the battle tanks. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg hails Germany's decision, saying its Leopard tanks can help Ukraine defend itself and prevail as an independent nation. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says alongside the Challenger 2 tanks, the Leopard tanks will strengthen Ukraine's defensive firepower. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomes Scholz's announcement and approval for other countries to send some from their own stocks.
Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova says Europe has plotted the Ukraine war against Moscow. Zakharova's comment is about the admission from Germany's top diplomat, Annalena Baerbock, who said the EU was fighting a war against Russia. Reports claim Baerbock said EU must do more for the defense of Ukraine, and they must do it together. Zakharova also recalls former German Chancellor Angela Merkel's claims that the Minsk Treaty of 2014 was used as a pretext to militarize Kyiv. In an interview with the weekly Die Zeit, Merkel said Germany and France's mediation efforts in the Minsk format were intended to give Ukraine time to get stronger. Earlier this week, Finland and Poland have said they are ready to provide their weaponry stocks. Germany and Britain already sent their own tanks. Meanwhile, reports say Washington wants to send a significant number of Abrams M1 tanks to Ukraine. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov warns that these heavy tanks would be destroyed on the battlefield. The Kremlin's warning came as Russian forces had advanced in Bakhmut, a key town in eastern Ukraine that Moscow has been trying to capture for months.
Russia's oldest human rights organization is put out of business. A judge in Moscow City Court ordered the closure of the Moscow-Helsinki group. The order is the latest in a series of legal rulings against groups critical of the Kremlin. That trend is on the increase since Russia's invasion of Ukraine nearly a year ago. The Moscow-Helsinki group was created in 1976 to monitor Soviet authorities' commitment to respect human rights. Over the years, members of the group were jailed, harassed, and expelled from the country. In 1982, the organization suspended operations. It came back to life in 1989. In a ruling, the group is accused of breaching its legal status by carrying out activities such as observing trials outside of Moscow.
Authorities escorted groups of people wearing life jackets and some wrapped in blankets into Dover, Kent. Migrants continue to flock to the UK amid several announcements from the government that they will be sent to Rwanda. Our UK correspondent Ryan Florentino files this report.
A record 45,728 made the crossing on small boats last year, up to more than 60% on the previous year. Government figures show 592 migrants have crossed the channel so far this year, but the activity was only recorded on 3 days in January. It comes as MPs heard flights sending migrants to Rwanda may not take place until later this year at the earliest, as there is ongoing legal action. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said the government still hopes to restart flights as soon as possible, but said it was right to wait until court appeals have concluded. Asked when the government hopes to restart flights to Rwanda, Mr. Jenrick told MPs as soon as possible. It obviously remains the government's policy. We see it as an absolutely critical way of deterring people from making the dangerous crossing and changing the business model of the people smugglers. Asked to confirm if the government was waiting for the appeal to conclude before any flights will start again, he said, yes, it's right that we await the outcome of the British courts. Then obviously, the government will decide how to proceed once we have the final judgment. Reporting from London, United Kingdom, I'm Ryan Florentino for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Mounting shortages of basic products continue in Peru. These include increasingly expensive fuel and food. This is due to over a month of anti-government demonstrations. The protests have no end in sight. Dozens of roadblocks hinder freight deliveries to the country's south. It is there where protests have been most intense. Demonstrations have started since the ouster of former President Pedro Castillo in early December. Rallies demanding the resignation of his successor, President Dina Boluarte, repeatedly turned violent. 46 people have died in clashes between security forces and protesters. Liquefied petroleum gas, the most popular fuel for vehicles and homes in Peru, has become scarce in the southern regions. The scarcity impacts some 7,000 taxi drivers in the region. Prices of basic food items such as potatoes and tomatoes triple. Peru's Transportation Ministry says 85 roadblocks remain throughout the country.
Left-wing lawmakers in Peru have filed a motion to impeach President Dina Boluarte over permanent moral incapacity. The group, whose members are also allies of former President Pedro Castillo, says their motion only needs 52 votes before it can be debated in Congress. Yet some analysts believe Boluarte may not be impeached, since conservative politicians who support her or support her are in control of Congress. A political crisis started in Peru when Castillo tried to short-circuit the third impeachment proceedings against him. Authorities arrested Castillo. Boluarte, who was his vice president, was sworn in. Analysts have noted how deeply Peru is immersed in political instability. The country has had 6 presidents in 6 years.
There were massive protests over the value of the currency in 2 Middle East countries on Wednesday. Demonstrators took to the streets in both Lebanon and Iraq. In Lebanon, protesters blocked roads and burned tires near the central bank in Beirut. They're upset that the local currency has hit a new low against the US dollar. Since 2019, Lebanon has been in the throes of an economic crisis. The World Bank has described it as one of the worst in global history, pushing much of the population into poverty. Banks in the country have imposed severe restrictions on the amount of money people can withdraw since the economy collapsed 3 years ago. Meanwhile, in Iraq, hundreds of people gathered in front of the central bank in Baghdad after the local currency dropped against the US dollar. The drop has fueled anger among Iraqis, whose purchasing power has declined. About 400 people took part in that demonstration.
Protesters fill the streets of Johannesburg in South Africa. They are upset with a prolonged energy crisis causing a record number of power cuts in the country. The demonstrators gather in the center of the financial capital. They march on the headquarters of the governing African National Congress. Most are dressed in blue, the color of the Democratic Alliance, which is the opposition party. Although blackouts have burdened South Africa for years, in the past 12 months, the outages have become more extreme. The lights go out several times a day, sometimes for a total of 12 hours. There is a strong police presence in the protest. About 5,000 people are expected to attend. Other demonstrations are planned elsewhere in the country.
An Israeli raid on the West Bank's Jenin refugee camp killed 9 people, including an elderly woman. That's according to the Palestinian officials. They also accused the Israeli army of using tear gas inside a hospital. According to the health ministry, aside from the confirmed deaths, 20 others have been injured, including 3 with critical wounds. A Palestinian health minister said occupation forces forcefully entered the Jenin government hospital and fired tear gas canisters at the pediatric department on purpose. The Israeli army responded that its forces are only operating in Jenin. It did not respond to the tear gas allegations. Thursday's fatalities bring the number of Palestinians killed in the West Bank this year to 24, including fighters and civilians, most of whom were shot by Israeli forces.
An African foundation says countries on the continent should not take democracy for granted. Mo Ibrahim, head of the organization that bears his name, says Africa's human and economic development has slowed against a backdrop of widespread democratic backsliding and worsening security.
This phenomena of the strong man, which again becoming fashionable all over the world, not only in Africa. We see a lot of those strong men everywhere. Some of our guys in Africa seem to look at these models and say, hey, I can also be like that. It is a problem. We face a real challenge, and we should not take democracy for granted.
Ibrahim adds he is optimistic because young people in Africa are better equipped to deal with the issue. He says they are better informed than previous generations. Up next, a knife attack on a German train leaves 2 people dead and 7 injured. The suspect in a letter bombing campaign in Spain has been arrested. And North Korea locks down Pyongyang over a respiratory illness. More news when Matanang Agila International comes back.
This portion is brought to you by Robic Builders, Quezon City Motor Vehicle Inspection Center.
Dito ang inyong sumbong siguradong may responding katapat. Hindi nagdadalawang isip na tumulong sino man ang nangangailangan. Iskinitang inirereklamo dahil sa perwisyong dala nito sa mga residente at may ilang bata pa ang naaksidente, pinarespondehan.
Madulas talaga. Nilulumot nga yan eh. Ano ba naman itong daan nyo? Ang gusto namin tanggalin na lang ang kanal.
Lumalalim na problema sa baha ng isang lugar sa Macabebe, Pampanga, ating inimbestigahan. Babaeng na biktima ng scam sa GCash, lumantad sa responde.
Wag na wag po kayo makikipag-usap sa kahit kanino, lalo na't hindi nyo kakilala, na nagpapakilala na taga GCash, na representative daw po sila, at hihingan kayo ng OTP.
Mapapanood nyo kami sa mga sumusunod na mga channels. Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Ito ang Responde, Mata ng Mamamayan.
This portion is brought to you by Source Alliance.
It's been a chaotic day for travelers at the Berlin airport in Germany. A strike by airport staff leaves planes grounded. Passengers looking at the arrivals and departures screen for the status of their flights see only one word: canceled. In all, some 300 flights were scrapped or rescheduled on Wednesday. The walkout affects about 35,000 passengers. The powerful Verdi union represents about 1,500 employees at the airport. It is pushing for higher salaries and bigger bonuses for people who work weekends and holiday hours. The union says inflation is making it harder for people to make ends meet. The one-day walkout is being billed as a warning strike ahead of the next round of contract talks.
A man went on a stabbing rampage Wednesday on a passenger train in Germany, killing at least 2 people and injuring 7 others. The train travels between the cities of Hamburg and Kiel. Passengers on the train managed to overpower the attacker. Police say the 33-year-old suspect is a stateless man of Palestinian origin. He was arrested at a railway station and treated in hospital for minor injuries. The motive for the attack is unclear. Germany has endured several deadly knife attacks in recent years. Some were carried out by extremists, while others were people suffering from psychological problems.
Spanish police have arrested a man suspected of being involved in a letter bombing campaign. It targeted the Prime Minister and the Ukrainian embassy. The suspect is a 74-year-old man. He was arrested in northern Spain. Police are searching his home. No one was killed by the 6 letter bombs that were sent in November and early December to various sites in Spain. However, an employee of the Ukrainian embassy was slightly injured while opening one of the packages. Among the sites targeted was the official residence of Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, Spain's defense ministry, and an airbase near Madrid. The arrest comes after a media report that Russian military intelligence officers had directed a white supremacist militant group based in Russia to carry out the campaign in Spain.
Free COVID-19 testing is still available in the United States. One of the country's health agencies has launched a website to locate the testing sites. Rosel Feria tells us more.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, launches the COVID-19 testing locator website. This website will allow consumers to search for free COVID-19 testing sites near them. The locator is part of the CDC Increasing Community Access to Testing, or ICATT program. It provides access to COVID-19 testing. It focuses on communities at a greater risk of being impacted by the pandemic, people who do not have health insurance, and surge testing in state and local jurisdictions. Tests offered may include laboratory-based nucleic acid amplification test, or NAATs, including polymerase chain reaction, or PCR test, and rapid antigen point-of-care, or POC testing. Results are typically provided within 24 to 48 hours. The CDC says testing is available at pharmacies, commercial laboratory sites, community sites, and retail locations. COVID-19 testing is available at no cost at ICATT sites to people with or without health insurance who are experiencing symptoms or have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. Consumers can access the testing locator at testinglocator.cdc.gov. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Rosel Feria, Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
North Korea has ordered a 5-day lockdown in Pyongyang over a respiratory illness. A government notice says residents in Pyongyang have been ordered to submit themselves to multiple temperature checks each day. Yet local reports did not mention COVID. They say the illnesses spreading in Pyongyang include the common cold. News sources say people in the city appeared to stock up on goods in anticipation of a lockdown. Pyongyang state media did not announce similar lockdowns in other areas or any new measures. However, health experts suggest that Pyongyang is likely dealing with the re-emergence of COVID-19. One researcher says COVID infections are disappearing and reappearing depending on the weather. Sources say temperatures in Pyongyang are dropping as low as negative 22 degrees Celsius due to the Siberian cold snap.
Heavy snowfall and low temperatures grip the South Korean capital of Seoul following a cold weather warning by South Korea's Meteorological Administration issued earlier this week. Cars slowed and stopped on icy roads, and bundled-up commuters carefully navigated snow-covered pavements as a snowstorm swept through the South Korean capital and nearby regions, extending a frigid cold spell that has been gripping the country. As of now, there were no immediate reports of serious disruptions or damage caused by the snow, ice, and sub-zero temperatures. Morning temperatures in the region fell to about minus 10 degrees Celsius, and more than 5 centimeters of snow was recorded in Seoul in the 24 hours, while neighboring Gyeonggi province and Incheon saw 6 to 8 centimeters of snowfall. The country's weather agency forecasted similar weather for Friday. Officials on their part warn drivers that conditions could worsen after a hard freeze of snowy surfaces. According to the Ministry of the Interior and Safety, about 2,100 public workers and 1,110 vehicles were deployed to spray more than 3,100 tons of snow-clearing chemicals and salt on main roads and expressways to prevent them from being dangerously slick during commuting hours. Japan's meteorological agency says the strong winter pressure pattern is bringing an influx of cold air over the country. Residents and tourists experience below zero temperatures, and western and eastern regions remain covered in snow. Transport officials urge locals to avoid traveling as traffic jams build up in areas where heavy snow is forecast. Authorities also closed some expressways. Though icy conditions have affected much of the country, most flights between Japan and Singapore are not affected. But authorities say they will continue to monitor the situation as the safety of their customers and crew remains their top priority. 8 people are dead, including 6 Chinese nationals, after a ship sank in waters off the coast of Japan. The vessel, called Jintian, sent a distress signal on Tuesday evening. It was positioned around 110 kilometers west of the remote and uninhabited Danjo Islands in far southwestern Japan. The search operation retrieved 13 crew members. The rescue was done through multiple vessels and aircrafts from Japan's Coast Guard and military, as well as the South Korean Coast Guard and private ships. China's Consul General confirms that among the 13 people found, 5 of them, including 4 Chinese crew members, are not in life-threatening conditions. As of now, the total number of injured, missing, and dead given by the Chinese diplomat are to be verified by Japanese authorities.
Many fishermen lost their livelihood to an overpopulation of the fish-addicted aquatic bird in a reservoir at El Cajon, Honduras. Fisherman Mariano de Jesus Redondo watches with dismay the thousands of cormorants that glide over the main hydroelectric dam. He says they used to catch 30 pounds of fish a day, but now they only catch 2 pounds of fish. Experts explain cormorants eat up all the fish that are released into the water by farms. They do not rule out that the current overpopulation is an effect of climate change. The aquatic birds can also be seen on the slopes and on the branches of trees, where they feed their young amid a concert of squawks. Authorities urge the government to take up measures to reduce the cormorant population.
Coming right up, Tesla reports record profits. Microsoft scrambles to fix a global outage. And a Sesame Street co-creator has passed away. Catch more news when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Lloyd patawad. Busted na. Nasisante pa. Di lang yan. Na-scam at bugbog sarado rin. Rockstar dreams, tuluyan na kayang mapurnada. Pero just when he's about to give up on life, meron siyang nakilala. Tanggapin kaya ni Lloyd ang imbitasyon ni Attorney Ferrer? Ito na kaya ang maghahatid ng bagong pag-asa? Abangan sa next episode this Sunday, 4 p.m. Dito lang sa Net 25.
The Philippine peso gained against the US dollar after it finished the day at 54 pesos and 40 centavos. It opened the day at 54 pesos and 50 centavos, better than its start in the previous session. The local currency's trading average was 54 pesos and 48 centavos. Meanwhile, the local stock barometer dipped down as investors monitored corporate earnings reports of listed firms. The Philippine Stock Exchange Index shed 0.55%, and all other indices also finished the day in the negative territory. Yet, analysts say the government's report about the 7.2% growth of the economy in the last quarter of 2022 is still better than median estimates.
Tesla reports another round of record quarterly profits Wednesday. It confirms a long-term growth outlook in spite of concerns about rising competition and macroeconomic headwinds. Based on the fourth quarter report, Elon Musk's electric vehicle company garnered a significant increase of profits up to 37%, equating to $24.3 billion compared to last year's record. In addition, the EV giant announced earlier this month vehicle price cuts in the United States and Europe, despite having challenges in rising interest rates and an uncertain macroeconomic environment. In response to rising challenges, Tesla revealed it accelerates its cost reduction roadmap, driving toward higher production rates. This year, the company looks to produce 1.8 million vehicles. That's about 31% higher than its 2022 production of around 1.4 million cars. Meanwhile, Microsoft says it suffered a global outage that limited access to software, including Outlook and Teams, for several hours on Wednesday. The tech giant said that there was a networking configuration issue, and they addressed it without causing additional impact. Microsoft also tweeted the impacted services have recovered and remain stable. The company launched an investigation into some potential impacts on the Exchange online service. The firm also did not reveal how many users were affected. Website Down Detector says it logged thousands of complaints from Asia and Europe. Lloyd Morissette, the co-founder of the popular children's television show Sesame Street, has died at the age of 93. On Tuesday, a tweet from the Sesame Workshop announced his death. The lifetime honorary trustee was praised for leaving an outsized and indelible legacy among generations of children over the world through Sesame Street. He was described by the workshop as a wise, thoughtful, and kind leader who for 4 decades utilized technology in new ways to educate children. Sesame Street first premiered on public television stations on November 10, 1969, and still airs today. Morissette's death comes after less than 2 months from the passing of Bob McGrath, one of Sesame Street's first non-Muppet regular characters, who died at the age of 90. More than 30 Afghan men challenged themselves to perform various exercises. They braved negative 15-degree temperatures by the banned Sarde Lake in the eastern province of Ghazni. Bilal Muhajid, head of the Ghazni Olympics Committee, says bodybuilding clubs from Ghazni organized an interesting winter event. He says they want to show their strength to the world. One participant says their goal in organizing the program was to show the power of Ghazni youth, to show people what an athlete is capable of. He adds they want to motivate youth to avoid drugs and start working out. Language translating devices have been gaining traction in sectors such as education and travel. In an effort to ensure that language is never a barrier, Kettle introduces its latest product, translation earbuds. In Pomona, California, Alan Basayahe has the story.
Need a breather after trekking all day at the Asian American Expo? Oh, take a break. A technology break. This time around, the product in focus are translator earbuds from Kettle.
Our product works very simple. You take out the earbuds and you pair with our app we developed. Then you share one of the earbuds to the person you want to speak to, and then you can each of them they can just speak their mother language. Yeah, then the translation will goes to two-way. Yeah, that's how does it work. We are supporting 40 languages and 93 accents. Which language you want to try?
English.
Okay. 你好，非常高兴今天在这里见到你。
It translated, hello, very nice to meet you today.
我想问一下，你这次来美国最大的印象是什么？
That's a long statement, but it says I'd like to know your biggest impression of this visit to the United States.
All the translation can show on the smartphone screen. Also, the translation will go to each side earbuds. You cannot imagine that how hard it is to learn a language, how much time you will spend. And also, sometimes you learn, for 2 years, maybe you don't use it for next 2 years, then you forget it. So I think I strongly recommend people, especially when they have already graduated, they have already spent too much time on their work. So they need to just make full use of artificial intelligence to empower themselves. Once the language barrier is removed, then there are going to a lot of things or beautiful thing is going to happen because people can understand each other, people can talk with each other. The relationship will become better and better, even more solid when you are dealing with in business, in personal, relationship, or even like the relationship between country with country. I think that's very important. That's why communication is connection.
A translation system that fits in your ear? The world really is becoming a smaller place. Alan Basoyahe, Pomona, California. Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Very interesting.
Quite so.
We're almost in the weekend, and to help you go through the last few days of the week, here's a quote from Chuck Close, an American artist. Amateurs wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get up and go to work. Because there's inspiration everywhere, right?
That's right. And it's up to you to see that. Big inspiration, small inspiration, that's up to you. It's all around you.
You have to be ready.
Eyes wide open.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.